So, a couple of weeks ago, we highlighted what I would say was an incredible hypocritical move by the Green Party. And that was, of course, expelling three party members, activists, for essentially engaging and encouraging in tactical voting in an attempt to get rid of Jeremy Hunt. And there is every reality and every possibility that if the Green Party had not decided to stand a candidate and that they had agreed with the local party who had made that decision that they thought it was in the best interests to get rid of Jeremy Hunt by supporting the Lib Dems. What does that say for the Green Party's stance on how much they apparently love local democracy and making sure that local people have a say? Well, not apparently, unless it refers to their party. Hence, it's just so bad. And this is why I've sort of started to sort of maybe do sort of and start talk to a bit things about this, because the Green Party have a lot of things wrong in them, and they do stuff like this more than people actually, I think, really realize. Um, and I think it should be highlighted, especially now is they, so should we say, want to go to the big leagues and cheering about the fact that they've now got 4 MPs. We'll see how long they actually keep them at the next election. Um, welcome to the big leagues. Welcome to the media spotlight. Because as I've said before, your infighting, your division, your bizarre policy decisions, the stuff that you go with sometimes is going to get a bigger spotlight. We've already said, trying to stop a big infrastructure project because you want a consultation about, do we want above ground pylons or below ground pylons? Well, we know which one works, but the, the Green MP currently, who again co-leader, wants a consultation to find out which one would be best. We already know which one's going to be best. Again, NIMBYism at its most purest form. There, a lump of purest green. But we're going to go on to this because there was in the Guardian over that article, if you remember when you were over it, there have now been 2 letters in response to that article. One in particular from a Green Party councillor. Now they do not say if this Green Party councillor is a local Green Party councillor. It just says local Green Party councillor. Whether they are local to Jeremy Hunt's seat or not, don't know. But you also have someone else who wrote, who is a member of the Green Party in that constituency, and he's very upset with the Green Party. So you've got 2 interesting kind of, things here. But what's really bizarre about this is that this Green Party councillor tries to now justify expelling these members over tactical voting. And to be honest, the first letter, I think, before it, which will also not read all of it, but we'll go over some of it, I think just goes to show how big the hypocrisy is on the Green Party of actually doing this, when they are the ones claiming that they are the future of politics, that they are the better way, that they are the third way. So, be careful what you say, guys. What is it? He who's without sin should cast the first stone. Yeah, people live in glass houses as well, all those types of sayings, but there you go. And before anyone says it, I know Labour Party's not perfect either, but I can at least own and admit that, whereas you guys can't, as we'll see in a moment. So before we go on into this, please do remember to click on the like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below, there is a YouTube thank you button. And of course, the Pony Club, the YouTube thank you button, buy me a coffee link as well. I think I've said one of those twice, but never mind. Of course, as always, let's crack on in them. So this was the Guardian in response to this, about the letters on this. But again, if you want to try and find this, the title is Green Party's Progressive Politics Leaves Members Out in the Cold. So this is the first one from someone who actually lives in here. As a Green Party member living in Jeremy Hunt's new constituency, I was heartened to receive a communication before the general election inviting me to vote on whether the selected GP candidate, Steve Williams, should stand aside to help improve the chances of unseating Mr. Hunt. I thought my vote and those of similar minds would count. And of course, if you remember, the Green Party National Office decided to brush aside the locals and, ignore them. And it goes on to say this, which I think perfectly sums this up. How far has the Green Party fallen? In December of 2016, Caroline Lucas celebrated the Liberal Democrats' by-election victory in Richmond Park after the local Greens stood aside, telling the Independent that it showed that if progressive parties are willing and able to work together, then we can win against the so-called regressive alliance. She said, I think standing aside clearly made a difference. It made a difference in the numbers and in the tone, because what we were doing was going out and talking to people about the need for a different kind of politics, a less tribal politics. If we can work together, we can maximize our chances of success. So remember, that's the word of Caroline Lucas. What Caroline Lucas said there in 2016 after the Green Party stood aside. Now we're going to hear from a local Green Party councillor try to justify this. And I think his justifications for this is awful. So, the Green Party's expulsion of members following its decision to stand down a local candidate to clear the general election field for the Lib Dems would seem to be heavy-handed and insufficiently respectful of local party democracy. So at least he opens by admitting that. But he then goes, however, no, there is no however. That should be it. Like, that should be it. And then maybe you realize everything else that this guy is about to try and justify about what the national committee did here, was kind of wrong. However, the principle of standing a Green Party candidate in every seat remains sound. Really remains sound. Okay, the entire general election campaign of the Green Party in this last election, let me remind you, was that they were standing the Fab Four. We are focusing on these 4 seats, and we're going to win these in these 4 seats, and we're going to get these 4 people in. That was their grand campaign strategy. Why on earth would you then decide to stand a candidate in a seat you knew you could not win, which would then get rid of someone very, very big in the Conservative Party like Jeremy Hunt? And remember, it was only a couple of hundred votes. A couple of hundred votes, which the Green Party got, could have seen Jeremy Hunt unseated. And if you remember that last section, that last article that we went over, they talked about how they had done this before in this seat to try and unseat Jeremy Hunt, and it had worked out pretty successful. And that they had been building on this since then, since that last election, to sort of get it in for this election. But the Green HQ decided to stand on that because, quote, remains sound. So he continues. The Greens, sorry, and the Lib Dems are very far from interchangeable parties. You're not talking about party politics here. One thing that they were sort of making very, very clear, the other thing that Caroline Lucas, as with comment she just read from there, very, very clear, less tribal politics, working together to maximize chances of success, to get rid of people like Jeremy Hunt. We could have got rid of him at this election. So this guy arguing for party dogma and tribalism over going for progressive politics of working together. I don't think that these 4 Green MPs are going to be very friendly or work together with any other parties, methinks, over the next couple of years. But we'll see what happens. So, try to imagine a Green Conservative coalition. If you doubt that, wait a minute. Why would you go from saying, "Oh, but the Greens and the Lib Dems very far from interchangeable parties," but imagine a Green Conservative coalition. Why are you not using the Lib Dems as a coalition party, as a coalition partner? Why are you just going immediately to the Conservatives? Oh, that's right. Because if you noticed about anything about the Green rhetoric over the past, well, since this election, as far as they are concerned, every other party that is not them is the Conservatives. They are becoming incredibly tribal in their politics. That is becoming increasingly, I think, very clear if you've been looking at what the messaging and stuff that they've been putting out since the election. So imagine a green conservative coalition. If you doubt that, and were the Greens to stand down in every constituency where a progressive candidate were judged to be more likely to be elected, the result would be an election landscape devoid virtually of any Green option for all voters. Except, what if you are the progressive candidate? Like, what if you are the progressive candidate and no one in that article that he was talking about was saying the Greens should stand down in all constituencies? They were saying, no, the Greens should have stood back in this constituency because they can't win, but you can have the opportunity to get rid of Jeremy Hunt and unseat Jeremy Hunt. It was specifically focused on that seat. So this guy goes, oh, if we stood down in this progressive alliance, there would be no, Green candidates at all, no Green MPs at all. Bear in mind, wind the clock back a couple of years ago, and you have the Green Party saying, we need to be part of a progressive alliance. We need to work together. We need to sort of come together and work how we can get in by using tactical voting, by having people stand down in different seats. And, they were willing to do a deal. It appears that that era of the Green Party is now gone. It is over. That there is no cooperation from this. And this Green councillor is making it very, very obvious, that that era of, progressive alliances working together to get things done well and truly over at this point. So, so back to this. So, calculations about who is most likely to win in a seat are inevitably based on an extrapolation of previous election results and bake in the very same status quo at a time when meaningful alternatives to business are now usual as sorely needed. Depends what seat it's in. Depends entirely what seat it is in. And in this seat, remember, where it's talking about this seat in particular, we're not talking about the rest of the UK. But bear in mind, one thing this guy's not mentioning, which again, I'm sure someone or pro-green will mention, what about all those other seats where they came second? I think now you're going to be getting the Greens, maybe in a couple of years' time, very, very interested in tactical voting in some of those seats where they came second. Just remember this, guys, that 4 years on, this guy is saying here that we shouldn't work together. That, we can't work together to sort of oust certain people. Remember this in a couple of years' time, because this is how it is coming across. This is absolutely how this is coming across. But there you go. Also, what if the Labour and Lib Dem candidates stood down in favor of a Green candidate? Because that's the type of like meaningful discussions if a progressive alliance again was meant to happen. As the Greens were all about a couple of years ago, Caroline Lucas wasn't even talking about having multiple Green MPs. She was like, "Oh, we want at least 4 or 5 seats where we can win." That's what she was. That's what the offer she was putting forward at the time. If people remember that. Again, how quickly the Green Party has now changed significantly on that stance. So much of tactical voting, right, guys? Anyway, Neil Lawson's electoral calculus makes the, I like this, dubious assumption, that the 1,000 or so Green voters in Jeremy Hunt's constituency would have meekly transferred their vote to the Lib Dems rather than, say, spoiling their barracks in frustration and a lack of choice. How do you know that? How do you know they would just have meekly transferred their votes? Because everything that we saw from that last article and another one covering this of the people involved in this who got kicked out, they had been laying the groundwork for this type of tactical voting for quite some time, and that they knew it was working. They knew that they were sending the message to people, hey, if you want to get Jeremy Hunt, if you want to get rid of Jeremy Hunt as your MP, this is the best way to do it. Because guess what? Those 1,000 or so voters mean nothing. It was a loss. Doesn't get rid of Jeremy Hunt. But if you vote Lib Dem, you get rid of Jeremy Hunt. So how does this guy know that they, wouldn't have gone if they had allowed tactical voting and hadn't very much encouraged it? How do they know that they wouldn't have gone? That we wouldn't have seen Jeremy Hunt? It seems to me he doesn't have any evidence on that except just calling it a dubious assumption. I think it's a dubious assumption to assume that those 1,000 or so votes would not have transferred. But anyway, back to this. He says, I do agree with Lawson that we need to work cooperatively to find common ground. But the place for this is after an election, not before. Oh, what an excuse. So we can't come together before an election to work together to make sure things like tactical voting work, but afterwards that's when we can come together. Again, this guy is trying to justify giving the boot for those Green members that got booted essentially for going for tactical voting and promoting tactical voting. I'm sorry, that's a poor excuse. That is a very poor excuse for justifying that. Seeking consensus should not be allowed to blur into excluding the only party offering a real alternative at the ballot box. Well, you say real alternative. I say Labour also offered an alternative. Lib Dems also offered an alternative. Why are they the real alternative when you're not going to win? And I say that very seriously. The Greens aren't going to win an election. Like, they'll win individually, as we've seen, but they're not going to storm to victory and have a majority. It's not going to happen. At least not anytime soon. Even then, anytime soon, you're talking a significant time. But I love the fact that we could only seek, consensus. That seeking consensus should not allow to be blurring the line, guys. That's just electoral tactical voting that just blurs the line and just obscures the only party really offering the alternative. I'm sorry, that is awful. That is an awful excuse to try and justify that. Otherwise, the authoritarianism, both he and I fear, will be upon us anyway, as voters disengage from the electoral system that just offers more of what has gone before. Something tells me this guy may be in favor of PR, but as I've said before, multiple times to people who want PR, until we get PR, you've got to play in the system that you've got now. and that is first past the post. You may not like first past the post. I do not like first past the post, but you have to play in the system that you have while advocating to change the system as well. And until that happens, you've got to play Monopoly like the rest of us. Like it or not, that's the game we've got to play. You know, you can't come in here like this guy and saying we should all be playing Cluedo because that's the real alternative. Because we're not playing Cluedo, we're playing Monopoly, you know, in first past the post edition. Yeah, we all would like to play Clue, but this is the game we've got at the moment. And that's the system we've got to deal with. But I also find it funny the authoritarianism both he and I fear. Well, what about the authoritarian decision to boot out 3 of your members over engaging in tactical voting, which could have got rid of Jeremy Hunt? That's a very, very poor, I think, excuse trying to justify the Green Party's national decision on that. I think that's a very, very poor excuse. I think it tells you the direction that the Green Party intends to go in, that they aren't interested in forming coalitions anymore, that they don't really seem to be interested in working together with any other people because, well, that might blur the lines. Um, but yeah, let me know what you think down below. I think that's a very, very pathetic excuse to try and justify that. But yeah, let me know what you think down below in the comments. And of course, as always, we'll see you all next time.